You can learn a lot from a trip to the hospital. Find out a lesson learned at the ER on this week's episode of Liberty at Home, and you won't even be charged a copay. Hello there, faithful ECAT viewer. You've stumbled across yet another episode of Liberty at Home. Yes, that 5-minute devotional brought to you by the Liberty Baptist Church right here in Easton. And speaking of Easton, today's broadcast comes to you via satellite from Easton, Massachusetts, where, fun fact, our Children's Museum in Easton Village is housed inside a historic 1904 firehouse. Today, I want to tell you a story about an ER visit from a few years ago with our son AJ and how it relates to a powerful biblical truth. But first, let's set the table by reading today's verses in Hebrews chapter 12. Beginning verse number 11, it says, "Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Wherefore lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed." When our son AJ was 8 years old, he fell and ended up getting a deep cut right above his left eyebrow. Sizing up the damage, my wife, Diane, and I decided a trip to the ER was in order. Of course, a patient never enjoys taking a trip to the hospital, but we were especially concerned because our little patient, AJ, is autistic. Amongst many other challenges, he also has sensory processing disorder, meaning that he has difficulty dealing with certain noises and sensations. We knew that getting stitches for AJ was not going to be easy. But once AJ was given a room, I specifically remember one nurse practitioner who was absolutely amazing. Her patience, compassion, and expertise were just what was needed in AJ's unique situation. I don't know how we would have done it without her. First, she applied a topical cream to the wound, numbing the area before the shot and the stitches that were to follow. Now, it was late in the evening at this point, and AJ slept through this part of the treatment. Diane and I were praying that he would simply sleep through the poking and the prodding that was to come. Boy, were we naive. As soon as the needle touched his skin, he tried to jump clear off the bed. He was angry, inconsolable really. He was dazed, he was confused, and he could not be reasoned with. Of course, we had to do something because if he couldn't stay still, he could likely get even more hurt. So after trying a few other measures, we ended up having to wrap him in a blanket and hold him on the bed. One nurse kept his head still while another held his feet. Diane and I held his torso and his legs. Holding back the tears, we tried to soothe him as he yelled and he cried. We knew it was for his own welfare and safety, but let me tell you, it broke our hearts. 6 excruciating stitches later, we were done. AJ was discharged, went back to sleep, and we made the drive back to Easton in silence, trying to recover from the trauma of the evening. Every couple of minutes, I looked back in the rearview mirror at AJ for some reassurance. He was now resting quietly in the back seat and well on the way to recovery. You know, it hadn't been fun, but we knew that unless we had held him down, he would never have healed properly, or even worse, he could have severely been hurt by the practitioner's sharp needle. Later, as I thought back on that evening, I was reminded that oftentimes God has to do something similar with us. Remember Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11, that tells us, "Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby." Now there are times God has to correct us, hold us down, if you will, to protect us from our own selves. Often we make sinful, foolish decisions that are contrary to God's word and His will for our lives. To protect us from ourselves, He has to correct us. In our limited understanding, God's children figuratively, and sometimes literally, yell and scream at God for hurting us. Yet God, in His infinite love, understanding, and wisdom, often has to protect us from ourselves so that we can heal properly. This healing brings the peaceable fruit of righteousness, which would be unattainable unless He performed the grievous work on us first. Have you been arguing, kicking, maybe even bargaining with God, trying to get out of a difficult situation? Be careful what you ask for, because you might end up missing out on the healing that God is trying to bring to your soul. The next time God tries to save you from yourself, let's trust Him and that He always has His best in mind for His children. Well, with all that being said, it's time for us to part for this week. I'm looking forward to being with you this next week as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus on Easter Sunday. And speaking of that, you are cordially invited to our services this coming week. You can join us for a Friday service at 7 p.m. where we consider the crucifixion of Jesus, which took place on a Wednesday. Now, intrigued? You'll have to visit to learn more. And don't forget our Resurrection Sunday service at 11 a.m. with a free breakfast served before at 9:45 a.m. Visit us in person at 800 Washington Street in Easton or find us online at mylibertybaptist.org. Well, this is Adam RIVEIRO signing off by reminding you that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. See you next week right here on Liberty at Home.